Mr. Chair, we want all of our advisory committee members to be people that, obviously are there and serve in the public trust and maintain the confidence on an ongoing basis.
Means not double dipping like 9 directors the Auditor General identified. Mr. Chair, with that, because of this testimony received earlier, I'd like to move the following motion. And we've given it to the clerk if the clerk wants to distribute it.
Why don't you read it first, then, Mr. Perkins? We'll just double check that it is in fact the same.
Okay.
Before sending it around.
That as part of the committee's ongoing study of Sustainable Development and Technology Canada, SDTC, the committee agrees to A, extend its current study of the Auditor General report by inviting the following additional witnesses. These are in addition to the study that we have ongoing now in the list of outstanding witnesses. So the new additional witnesses, given the testimony, John Newbley, the former Deputy Minister of ISED, where a lot of this happened, Casey Doyle, acting board member of SDTC, Martha Morgan, acting board member of SDTC, Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. I'll explain why him in a few minutes. Andre Lise-Matteau, founder of Cycle Capital and a former member of SDTC board. Stephen Kakucha, former board member of SDTC. Guy Ouimet, former board member of SDTC. And Annette Basharian, former chair of SDTC. And that B, the committee report to the House that it asks the Auditor General to undertake a value for money and performance audit on the work done by SDTC since January 1st, 2017.
Just hold there. I'm going to suspend just for a second. I'm going to first endeavor to get this out to all members, so just hold on a second. So I'm going to allow Mr. Perkins to just wrap up his comments briefly. I have an agreement, or pardon me, I have a request to then have the last questioner or the last member ask the witnesses questions. It will take 5 minutes. And if there's agreement, I'll do that. Now, that does circumvent the normal procedure, which is to turn to motions right away. I will remind people that this opens up the opportunity to end the meeting, but I remind people that I will bring us back to deal with this matter immediately if that happens. So on good faith, I think we're going to do that. I have been not scheduling meetings next week during caucus, but if there is funny business on this and this agreement is upended for any reason, then I will use the powers I have to return to this forthwith. So, Mr. Perkins, you have the floor briefly, then I will turn to Ms. Bradford to ask her last round of questions, then I'll excuse the witnesses and we'll turn to this motion. Mr. Perkins, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So briefly, we have an existing motion with continuing studies that I know there are a number of witnesses that the clerk has been trying to get before the committee, but in light of the testimony today and some of the earlier testimony, perhaps, Mr. Chair, I could briefly explain why the addition of these folks. John Newbley, the former deputy minister, he was there. As most know, Simon Kennedy, I think, has been the deputy minister there for only about a year, but most of what has happened under SDTC's term, including the appointment of some of these directors that were brought out in the Auditor General's report, was under Mr. Newbley's tenure as deputy, and he was involved very much in the discussions of what was called managed conflicts between the former president of SDTC, Leah Lawrence, and the government in seeking out a chair replacement. I think we've had a lot of testimony today already about the clarification that the witnesses have given us about their current role and responsibility versus that of the acting board that the minister appointed. Our current existing study motion has the current acting chair of that on the list, but it did not have either Casey Doyle or Martha Morgan, who are the other two that the minister appointed, so I believe they should also appear. Stephen Guilbeault, the Minister of Environment, in his public disclosure, continues to hold shares in one of the largest recipients of funds from the Liberal Green Slush Fund. Cycle Capital's received over $200 million, and Stephen Guilbeault not only worked there before being elected, but was still owns shares in his public disclosure and is benefiting from the investment by SDTC in Cycle Capital's businesses. Andre Lise-Moutot was his boss at Cycle Capital and is the founder there. And again, she has received, as I said, her company, since its inception, over $200 million of green slush fund money. Stephen Kukucha and Guy Ouimet both were directors of SDTC who also had conflict of interest pointed out by the Auditor General in terms of funds that went to companies they had interests in. In fact, the Ethics Commissioner report mentions Guy Ouimet but doesn't actually proclaim anything about him, even though it's clear from the evidence that he voted in favor of $4 million for his own company. And Annette Vicherin, who we all know is the chair of SDTC, who was appointed and knowing that she had been doing business with SDTC, and that set a culture of conflict. And that culture of conflict, as we know, is 196 of a little over 226 projects the Auditor General looked at were actually projects that had some sort of conflict of interest declaration, and therefore set the tone when she joined about the issue of it being okay to just leave the room when 82% of the transactions being approved by the board are to conflicts. That is clearly goes way beyond just bad legal advice. And on B, because the Auditor General only did a selection of the projects and did not look at the full $800 million that was given out in that audit period of the $832 million that was given out of the $2.1 billion that the Green Slush Fund has given out since its inception. We are asking that the Auditor General do a full audit of everything, because we believe we've only scratched the surface with his random sampling of projects.
Thank you. Call the meeting back into order. I'm sure this will prompt whips to ensure members are back in their seats forthwith. I will give, of course, a few minutes for this to happen. Mr. Perkins, you have the floor, and I do see people coming back online. So, Mr. Perkins, you have the floor for your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So where I left off was the rationale for the individuals and the reasons this is of concern. And today was actually with the NRC was quite disturbing as well, because it appears that the new SDTC is still the old SDTC in the sense that it is still independent, reporting to the minister, and still through a different board of 3 different people, but with the same management and no evidence of real change, which is why we wanted to have the NRC here today to get a sense from them about how they were going to run it and whether they have been running it and what have they been doing to prevent the challenges that SDTC has that were identified by both the Ethics Commissioner and the Auditor General. Yet today we see that process hasn't even started yet. It's still the same old green slush fund, which gave out, had 186 votes in out of about 400, which were conflicted, according to the Auditor General. Now, the Auditor General said there were over 400 votes, but the Auditor General didn't actually go through all of those votes. The Auditor General went through a small sample size of 226. And of that 226, 186 were conflicted. 186 of 226. 82% of what went before this board were conflicted payments to companies that those same directors had an interest in. There's quite a list of some of them that the Auditor General had given us, in addition to what was in the report. And so it seems that every time we have a witness or have a report by an officer of Parliament, it uncovers more and more. And not that this is all of it, because as we know, the House of Commons voted for a production of documents order on the Liberal Green Slush Fund. And that production of documents order required every government department, SDTC, to turn over their documents to the law clerk of the House of Commons so that the law clerk could turn those over to the RCMP. And we now know from letters received before this committee that the law clerk has written to the Speaker, informing the Speaker that the Prime Minister's own department, the PCO, gave direction to all government departments to actually redact elements of any documents they have using the Access to Information Act and Privacy Act changes. Although he points out in that letter that there was no such restriction put in the House of Commons motion that passed with the majority of members in the House of Commons, that the House of Commons motion is supreme on this. It's not restricted by any act of Parliament, yet the Prime Minister's office clearly interfered through the PCO in trying to prevent the information from getting out. And that's why this committee, the Public Accounts Committee, which examines the Auditor General reports on the expenditures of money, needs to have an expanded study on the Liberal Green Slush Fund, because we know that where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's probably a lot more going on here than the 226 projects the Auditor General looked at out of the $1 billion Liberal Green Slush Fund. So as a result of that, we need to ask these directors who are involved in the current transition, as well as those who are named in the Auditor General's report, for more clarity before this committee. And we need to ask that the Auditor General herself do a more extensive study of what's been going on in the Liberal Green Slush Fund than she did in her selective sampling, random sampling of projects. So I would hope that all committee members will support that we get to the bottom of this, because right now we don't know if anything's changed. The NRC doesn't know if anything's changed, contrary to what the minister said. The minister said, as of the date, the NRC has control and it will be up to this pristine level of accountability. Yet the minister himself has not met once with anyone in the NRC to figure out how the heck this thing's going to get cleaned up. So the 40 months that Minister Champagne was the minister during SDTC, that he did nothing, while an ADM sat in every meeting where this happened that reports to him through the deputy. He did nothing until it made it into the media. He did nothing through all the parliamentary hearings. And his only response has been, I'm going to transfer it to the NRC. That'll clean it all up. And he cares so much about it, he hasn't even met with the NRC to see what they're doing and to give direction, and neither has his staff. So I think it's essential this committee keep examining the issue to get to the bottom of these issues that have been raised today, but also by the Auditor General and the Ethics Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perkins. I have Ms. Khalid. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not really sure why the Conservatives are so hell-bent on politicizing a process. And, if we go through the timeline here, the Minister for SDTC, responsible for SDTC, identified an issue, acted on it, read the report of the Auditor General, which is at an arm's length person who provides the oversight of our public accounts, of how taxpayers' money is spent, took in their recommendations, and took some substantial steps on how to fix the process. We had witnesses here today from the NRC, and they talked about what that transition looks like. They talked about what the impact of a program like this is on small businesses. They talked about how we are going to improve the system. And that is exactly what our role is here as members of the Public Accounts Committee. Our role is not that of a judiciary. Our role is to find issues and challenges, to take the advice and the recommendations of the Auditor General and others, and to help in improving the process, to ask the relevant questions on what is next. So I'm not sure why, the members opposite feel that, if there's smoke, there's fire, let's go on this witch hunt expedition, etc. Let's bring in everybody. Let's basically demolish public trust by calling again and again and again same witnesses. And people have been on record. The Auditor General herself has felt, and she has expressed as much, how uncomfortable she feels by people telling her how to do her job. And the member opposite spoke about, getting her to do her job even more. Well, I think that her and her office are arm's length. They are doing their job. They just released this report, and we don't need to dictate to them how to conduct themselves. What we're seeing here, Mr. Chair, is an exercise in a fishing expedition on the back of industry and of small businesses. It's unfortunate. I have sat in committees over these past number of years, and I have seen again and again businesses being brought in, put in through the ringer to the point where they become targets. And I don't think that that's fair, and I don't think that that's the job of what this committee is responsible for. I think that, sure, if we are going to proceed with this motion, that there are some amendments that need to be made here. And we should be focusing on ensuring that we are doing the right thing in order to improve the process, as opposed to creating a witch hunt process in which we're hauling in anybody and everybody who the Conservatives seem to think are enemy number one. Anything to get an extra click, anything to raise an extra buck for their party. It's unfortunate. So I would like to amend this motion based on who is responsible for what. So first and foremost, the Minister of Environment should be struck from the list of witnesses that are required in this motion, because they don't have that him nor his office has anything to do with any of this. Secondly, I'd like to include two names in the text of the motion. Firstly, the Auditor General herself and the RCMP Commissioner, because I believe that both have important testimony to provide on Parliament's continued study of SDTC, including their grave concerns on the CPC June 10th motion, which is compromising their independence, as they have stated. And an article in the National Post from a few days ago dug more into this, with a former senior parliamentary counsel for the House of Commons quoted saying that the Conservative motion is both completely unprecedented and a likely abuse of Parliament's powers. Academics have already raised concerns, saying that by demanding the documents with the sole purpose of passing them on to the RCMP, the House of Commons is overstepping its bounds, and these actions raise a number of constitutional issues here. Our job as parliamentarians is to ensure proper oversight and accountability of public funds. It is not to act outside of the bounds of Parliament, Mr. Chair. I think it's incumbent on us to hear from both of these witnesses the AG and the RCMP Commissioner, that have brought these real concerns regarding Parliament's actions on SDTC. Any extensions of this SDTC study should include testimony from both of those witnesses, in my view. So I would then propose that we remove Minister Guilbeault from the list, and that we add the Auditor General and the RCMP Commissioner to the list of witnesses for a more wholesome testimony as to what exactly is going on here. And Chair, it's time for us to start doing the right thing amongst all parliamentarians at this table. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So